So it's apparently Halloween, basically. And I keep trying to do super Halloween focused paintings just to kind of try and get into the spirit months and months early. Don't get me wrong, I love Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. It's the only one I don't have to spend at somebody else's house. And we typically make our own Halloween decorations, so we start fairly early whenever we get around to it. That being said, I don't want to just paint jack o' lanterns and bats. And so I just started doing the slightly creepier, funky stuff that I like to do that I haven't posted on social media yet. And since it's Halloween, I can start doing that, I think. These little guys, these little devil guys, are coming out of this tree. You remember in Sleepy Hollow where the headless horseman like comes in and out of the hell tree? It's kind of like that. It's kind of like a little hell tree. Although I wouldn't say they're necessarily devils like hell devils. Maybe they're just like little imps, little gremlin-y creatures that are like maybe they're also small fae. Like, I have one fairy, and she comes from a species of entirely female fairies. Maybe these are like entirely male, and they're just little imps, and they don't have wings, and they're incredibly mischievous, and they get into all sorts of crap. That's what they are. But maybe this is their first time coming out of the tree. Because, like, in my magical universe, world lore, whatever, the magic world and the human world are kind of exploding back into each other after being separated for many millennia. So maybe they're like climbing out of this tree into the human world for the first time, and they're like, oh yeah, we could definitely get into it here. You know those little tiny dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park movies that just kind of swarm people and children and things and then just start eating them alive while they're fighting them off? I imagine them kind of like that. Maybe slightly less violent. But I imagine them to be kind of like that. They just kind of take over, they swarm, and then they do a lot of damage for being such tiny little dudes. And there's just so many of them you can't fight them off. Maybe they are that level of violent. I think it kind of makes sense if they're like these aggressive little predatory fey creatures and they're kind of like a polar opposite to the female fairies, which are like innocent and sweet. Maybe that's why the female fairies have wings and these little imps don't, so that they can escape from the little monsters. Maybe they're actually from like the same species or like a similar they like branched off from the same species and they ended up living separately because the little male imps were just these terrible little monsters and the females were kind of like these sweet innocent little floating butterfly babies, and so they've just lived completely separately. I think it would be so interesting to have an encounter with them. Probably not great, uh, but I think it would be an interesting encounter. Like maybe our other fairy Juniper like leads the way. Maybe she's like, let's take down these little monsters. And maybe they have wings specifically so they can escape them, right? I imagine that would be useful for little imps that can't fly. So they evolved specifically to avoid the males of their long ago species that they branched off of from. Yes. Maybe they can be whipped into shape. Maybe Juniper can take over her other fairies. Maybe she gets tired of human men after her exploits out in the world. And she comes back. And of course, none of them know who she is because all the fairies that she did know have already been squashed or eaten by a bird or something. So she comes back, and maybe they're being completely terrorized by these little imps because whatever happened with the two worlds coming back together, somehow they ended up close to each other, close enough to interact. And so the lady fairies are doing their best to avoid these little imps, and they just keep coming. And so maybe Juniper comes in and she's like, all right, no more of this sweet little girl crap. And she teaches them how to fight and how to stay alive, and maybe they start fighting back against these little imp dudes. And little imp dudes mostly are just mischievous. I don't think that they're like, let's take them down, let's get those wings. Maybe. That could be cool. Maybe they kind of like whip them into shape and they're just so taken with these newly violent, strong females that they're like, oh my God, they're angels. And they kind of are able to be kept in line because Juniper taught them how to keep them in line. That'd be an interesting storyline. It's like a battle of the sexes, but for real. Sort of, because they're tiny fairy people. Okay, so after her time out in the world with the humans and having to use magic to have her little rendezvous with human men in order to be, of course, large enough for that to be safe and possible, she comes home and she teaches the other fairies of her type how to be just hardcore like she is. And they start fighting back and defending themselves against these terrible little imps that come out of this tree. And they are so taken with the strength and beauty of these fairies. They're like, we will serve you, my queens. And they become like this incredibly like healthy matriarchal society. Except they're always little monsters, just not to the female fairies. And now she's kind of like the queen of the little fairies, male and female. And she can send the little male ones out to go, I don't know, commit atrocities against other types of fairies. Sounds like something she would do, especially if they ticked her off. And as a result of this, her type of fairy is now living longer and longer because rather than being eaten by birds and squished, they're living long enough to have some world experience and avoid certain things. So they're becoming a little bit, not like Juniper because she's the only one like her, but they're living longer, they're getting smarter, they're being a little bit more world weary, a little bit less sweet and innocent. Like maybe the younger ones still are, kind of, but they're all kind of teaching each other how to stay alive. Whereas before, they just kind of let whatever happened happened. So I think this is good for both sets of fairies. I'm wondering, because fairies that lived independently and evolved separately had, a single reproductive situation on both sides. Maybe that changes now that they can interact with each other, or maybe that's just completely a non thing in this scenario. I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Anyway, so it's almost Halloween. We're going to start working on Halloween decorations. Are you guys already thinking about Halloween? The stores definitely say it's Halloween. The stores are like, here, buy your Halloween stuff. Start decorating now. Buy candy way ahead of time and get 20 pounds heavier eating all the Halloween candy that you're trying to get at a reduced price because you're buying it now instead of in October, but you end up eating it all and having to buy new anyway. That's probably what they're planning, right? You just eat like 10 pounds of Halloween candy. That's what happens in our house anyway. We try to get it early and then we just eat it. Let me know. Are you guys decorating for Halloween? Is it too early for you? I don't think it's too early. It's just right. Anyways, I hope that you guys like the stories that I'm telling. If you do, please like and subscribe. And I hope to see you here again. Bye, everyone.